Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. So we like to go around and say our names before we hear from our speaker. When you introduce yourself, consider taking a breath or a moment after the person before you. And also, if you feel moved to encourage you, you can share your preferred personal pronoun. And my name is David, he, him.
I'm Brad.
I'm Shantanu.
I'm Adrian.
I'm Mark, he, him.
Mark, him.
Larry.
Don. I'm Jim.
Mark, he, him.
I'm Greg.
My name is Gary.
My name is Michael, he, him.
My name is Ray.
Dennis. My name is Stephen.
Matthew. My name is Bob.
I'm Ed.
Eduardo. Jeff.
Rick.
My name is Jerry.
Jack.
Mariano.
I'm Mike.
Jay.
I'm Nancy.
My name is Lee.
Tim.
My name is Joe.
Bill, he, him.
My name is Christopher.
I'm Brett.
I'm Randy. Him.
Michael.
Jim.
George. Ted.
I'm Dave.
John.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks
Not
for-
Johnny come lately.
Welcome, Dave Richo. Dave Richo works as a psychologist. He's also a writer, and he teaches, and he's written numerous books. One of which he has delved into the topic of the shadow, which is what his topic is for today. So welcome, Dave, for being here.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody. The teaching in Buddhism that reminded me of the shadow side that Jung talks about is called the three poisons. Three interferences on the path to enlightenment: greed, hate, and illusion. And they only become interferences when we act on them, but they're all capacities in every human. So the greed part interferes with the teaching of generosity, and also the truth about getting attached to something which leads to suffering. The hate poison is the opposite of the loving kindness practice, and the illusion refers to the central illusion, which is that we're all separate instead of all connected. So when I give in to one of these three, or all three, it will be well nigh impossible to stay on the spiritual path. However, if it's true that I have those three capacities, the good news is that I also have three other capacities. In addition to greed, I have a capacity for generosity. In addition to hate, I have a capacity for love. In addition to illusion, I have a capacity for openness to the enlightened path. Or another way of saying it is that everything in the psyche comes in pairs of opposites. So, like coins that can't help but have two sides, our capacities also have two sides. So we have a set of capacities for virtues and capacities for vices. This leads us to an important realization, which is that no matter how highly we might think of ourselves, or how negatively we might think of ourselves, there's always another side. The ancient Roman poet Terence has this line which says so much. Anything any human might do is who I am. So if there's a Hitler, that's in me. If there's a Dalai Lama, that energy is in me also. It's almost as if we were walking through life with a dog on one side of us and a wolf on the other. Sometimes we feed the dog, and sometimes we feed the wolf. But there's no one who doesn't have both. So Mother Teresa has a wolf, and Hitler had a dog. All of us have these both sides. Now, from the Jungian point of view, instead of acknowledging and knowing about both of these sides, we engage in a kind of repression of them, which goes all the way back to early life. We notice qualities in ourselves that are not acceptable in the environment we were living in. So in this household, it's not okay to be angry. Or in this household, it's not okay to be fearful. What we do is, since it's unsafe, we very wisely repress certain qualities about ourselves. And these go into a, shall we say, unconscious part of ourselves. And they sit there waiting to be acknowledged. But since they felt dangerous to begin with, or since we felt ashamed about them, it's going to be very hard to bring them up into our conscious life. And of course, they're holding a lot of our creativity, so it would be helpful if we could do this. And I'll be talking about how this can happen. Sometimes we think the dark side only means the sinister impulses that we notice occasionally in ourselves. But from Jung's point of view, we also will be repressing wonderful powers. Joseph Campbell's way of putting this is, there are powers that we have never dared to acknowledge. So I have both sides in me. I have the part of me that's more wonderful than I could ever imagine, and I have the part of me that's more dangerous than I might imagine. So let's take this poem by Emily Dickinson, written during Civil War times. So we're reminded that all through the ages, people have realized that there's more to us than meets the eye, more than what we see in the mirror, more than we hold in our consciousness as the portrait of ourselves. one need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place, far safer of a midnight meeting, external ghost, than the interior confronting that cooler host. Far safer through an abbey gallop, the stones a chase, than unarmed one self-encounter in a lonesome place. Ourself behind ourself concealed should startle us most. Assassin hid in our apartment be horror's least. The body borrows a revolver and bolts the door, or looking a superior specter or more. So we're careful about all those dangerous people who might be hiding in our space, overlooking a dangerous set of impulses in ourselves, such as toward greed, hate, or illusion. Her poem also says, well, there's a self behind ourself, but it's concealed, unacknowledged, disenfranchised from the rest of the provinces inside of us. And of course, they're all clamoring throughout our lives to come to the surface, to be seen in the light. And once they're seen in the light, they reveal some kind of wonderful creative possibility. Well, if it's like this with us as humans, if this is our situation, and if at the same time the psyche is totally oriented toward what Jung calls individuation, what in Buddhism would be the goal of enlightenment, what for Freud would be healthy ego. If there's something in us that wants to flourish, blossom into our full self, then there must be some way or ways by which this can happen. And it turns out that there certainly are. The first way, from both the point of view of Freud and Jung, are dreams. Because dreams are happening in the unconscious, which is where the shadow side is. And this shadow side reveals itself. Remember, ourself behind ourself concealed. So there's something in us that reveals in a personified way. So we see characters in the dream who represent various human energies, positive and negative. Those energies, especially from Jung's point of view, the ones of your same sex, could represent your shadow side. So if you dream of somebody being very heroic, you're noticing finally, I have that kind of heroism in myself. If you meet up with a character who's criminal or dangerous or aggressive, oh, maybe I have an aggressive side to myself that I'm not showing. My persona, the picture of myself that I project to the outside world, maybe doesn't include all the features of myself. Some have been disowned, renounced. Wisely so, because it wasn't safe to show them. But now as adults, we could actually bring up some of the hidden artifacts from the trunk in the attic of our mind, and we could show them to a trusted friend or therapist or lover, somebody, and say, hey, this is in me, and I just want you to know about it, and I'm going to be on the lookout for how to work with it so that it becomes something really useful. In addition, the most common way that the shadow shows itself, and here we're very fortunate because this one's easy. The dream path is difficult because it all occurs in symbols that we might not understand. But we do understand the second path, and that's projection. What we strongly dislike in other people could be what we are hiding or disowning in ourselves. So I see you being controlling and getting away with it, and that gets me mad. I have a strong reaction. That could be a clue, the strong reaction could be a clue. Well, I may be manipulative in subtle ways. He does it openly and gets away with it. I don't like that. But the projection is, shall we say, ricocheting back to me and telling me something about myself. Jung has a beautiful definition of projection. It's making the whole world a replica of our own unknown face. I have a face that's not known to me, but when I look at your face, I see a mirror of myself, but I deny the mirror quality and say it's only in you. Everybody get the concept? And I'm going to open up for questions shortly. But it goes further than that, because remember, there's a positive shadow. What I strongly admire in somebody else, I also have as a potential in myself. So I strongly dislike controlling people, and I strongly admire assertive people. Well, you wouldn't strongly admire if you didn't also have that inside yourself. The key is the strong feeling. When you just take other people's qualities as information, then it's probably not the shadow. I'll give a simple example. Let's say you have a friend and you notice he's kind of controlling. He has to be the one who decides where you're going to sit in the movie theater. He has to be the one who decides what time you're meeting, and so forth. You like this person, you notice he's like that, and it's okay with you. It's just information. You don't get all hissy and, try to retaliate, get angry. In other words, it hasn't triggered you at a deep level of projection. It's just out there as data. When that happens, you're not seeing part of yourself. Now, why would we hide the positive side? Probably fear of our own power. I don't want to, as Joseph Campbell said, these are the powers we have not dared to integrate. Or I don't want to know I have all these wonderful virtues because then I'll have to act on them. And I designed a life without that. So, everyone has a hidden side. This hidden side has some positive qualities and some negative qualities. There are ways in which these hidden features of ourselves can rise up into the light, and when they do, they show themselves to have some possible creative elements. I'll give a simple example. Let's say in your shadow side is something about being manipulative or controlling, which you would never admit is true of you, although your friends notice it. The creative side of it is, I must really be good at organizing, good at follow-up, good at setting up a plan. Those are all wonderful qualities, even leadership. So when it comes to the surface, it will reveal some positive dimensions. Those are the ones we want to act on. So let's just open it up for any questions that you have immediately before I go on to the next thing. So that's just the overall picture. Anybody have any questions or ideas? Rick.
I had a thought about the controlling thing.
Yeah.
You can just notice it neutrally if it's not sort of like triggering something in you, which sounds very helpful. I'm wondering though about what if it's more than just controlling? What if somebody's actually being abusive? Then it seems like when we may have a negative reaction to that, and that's not just because we have an inner abuser. It could be because we need to protect ourselves, or maybe we've been abused in the past.
Good point. And I should have mentioned that. There are times when you would be upset by something, and it's not really your shadow. The way to tell the difference is the shadow style will be, it gets your goat, it gnaws on you, and you want to judge that person or even retaliate. If it's what Rick brought up, which is a justice issue, like somebody's being unjust, and that really bothers me, that will take you to, I want to do something about it that will make a difference. That's how you tell it's not really in you. So I see somebody as being abusive in some way, I want to confront them about it, or I want to report this to some authority that will help me reach him. That would not be the shadow side. Everybody see the difference? You had a Harvard.
Pretty much the same question. Yeah. But I guess there's, but I think this is implicit in what you've said so far, is that there are things, sometimes when we have strong reactions and sometimes when we have dreams, it's a pathway to understanding what you're calling the shadow side, what you call the shadow side. But other times, these strong reactions or dreams don't have that significance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially recurrent dreams clue you into shadow material. Wanting to be the fullest human I can be would make us very interested in focusing on this topic. Oh, I really want to find out what happened to me in New Haven, Connecticut that made me squash certain traits and qualities because I picked up, you don't want to show that, David. He's not going to be safe here. Not in this environment. And I would want to treat them as lost, treasured parts of myself that I could finally make peace with. So that's how this kind of work would sound when you're really into this path of full integration, let's say. Now, let's go on to a second part of it, because it turns out that it's not just personal. Not only do we have the experience of ourselves in our original family unit and our personality characteristics that emerged from our family experience. We would call that our family album, which has all the faces of ourselves, some of which we recall and some of which we have forgotten or repressed. But in addition to that, we're also members of a collective, a species called humanity. And that particular gene pool has its own shadow. Some of us will never be in situations in which we will confront this part, but we certainly will hear about it on the news. So in the, shall we say, negative side, dark side, and dark does not refer to complexion, obviously, it refers to unconscious, not in the light of consciousness. So, dark side of our particular gene pool, Homo sapiens, are some characteristics that have always been on the planet and are still on the planet even today. War, genocide, hate crimes, torture, slavery, to name just 5. And right this minute, all 5 of these are happening. And they were happening last week, they were happening the day you were born, they were happening all the way back to the origin of our species, let's say. So that tells us that there's a dark side which we even know about, and that sometimes a political leader comes along who wants to lead us into one of these, or sometimes we hear of things going on in society that represent one of these negative characteristics of our species. And then it will be up to us to say whether we want to protest against this and take a stand and work toward peace, the end of human trafficking with a new form of slavery, certainly hate crimes, and try to make a difference. Occasionally someone comes along who is possessed by the dark side. Not only does he have a dark side, as we all do, but he has become possessed by it so that his entire life is focused on doing dreadful things that lead to Holocaust. In addition, within our human species, we also have inherited positive qualities such as self-sacrifice, giving your life for the poor, giving your life for social justice, being outstandingly generous, being caring about the economically disadvantaged. So that is also part of what's in us. And it's sitting in there in our DNA. It isn't just sitting in the cells of our bodies because of how our parents treated us or how they X'd out certain characteristics of us that they were uncomfortable with, and we thereby disowned and drove them into our bodies, where they sometimes come through as anxiety or panic. In fact, Jung says the unconscious is the body. It's not up here in the head. It's the whole self. But in addition, we have the collective shadow, very dangerous in its negative aspects and very wonderful in its positive ones. And these qualities are not hidden. People come along in history who represent them and who definitely act them out. So you can't miss it. So it's not quite the shadow in the same sense as the personal one. But we're always keeping in mind that somewhere inside of us are tendencies that are something like the people in history that we have strongly hated or strongly loved. Everybody follow about this part? Any questions or ideas? David?
It seems like some of the things you're referring to don't happen necessarily but by an individual, but it's a collective. It takes a lot of people for these things to happen. And in my mind, it's tied also with it's kind of a karmic thing, but it's like causes and conditions that make space for behaviors as collective behaviors to arise. And often those are related to like economic realities, social geography is related, access to resources, everything that kind of led up to that point in which those things come to fruition. Mm-hmm. I don't have a point here. Other than that, that just like, is that there's like, my mind goes like it's a karmic thing of where causes and conditions allow for behaviors to arise in people. It's not like one person makes human trafficking happen.
No.
We're all kind of responsible for it.
Yeah.
Sitting here, in that way,
That's a very good point.
And just
kind of reminds me of a realization I had a number of years ago, which seems to fit better in my mind regarding Hitler. Of course, when I was born, he was already close to dying, so I don't have any sense of him except historically. But I thought to myself, I shouldn't be saying he led people into the horrible things that happened. Now I'm saying it this way, rightly or wrongly. He appeared as one willing to act out the darkest wishes of the people. He didn't make them hate. He noticed the hate and he said, I will do the things that will put your hate into practice. Once you see it that way, you start to alter your sense of what leaders do. They don't come up with an idea and make you follow it. They pick up on your shadow side. And they're crazy enough to come up with a final solution. So I'm kind of keeping that in mind. Yeah.
What you just said reminded me, and
other area. Wes Craven, the film director, who actually just passed away recently, and was known for directing horror films. And somebody asked him, why do you like to scare people? You know? He goes, no. People come into the theater, they're already scared. I just give them a release for it.
Mm. Good point. Yeah, you wouldn't go to that kind of a movie unless you wanted to be scared. I want to mention one other feature of all this. Jerry,
You know, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jim had-
Dave.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderfully provocative talk. Today I read that Bruno Ganz, a fabulous Swiss actor, died, and who was known in a Wim Wenders film as an angel, just a benevolent, loving angel who wanted to become human because he had fallen in love with the trapeze artist. Just the kindest, most profound, benign presence. And he said it followed him his whole life. People would stop him on airplanes to bless their children. And yet he played Hitler in Downfall in the most harrowing depiction of, the end of the line for this monster. So that one actor could put out such extremes is a real testament to the human spirit. Once in college, I had a solo psychedelic trip, and I went to the bathroom, and I was washing my hands, and looked in the mirror, and instantly, using my face, became a prey of monsters, of internal, killers, and the worst sorts of ruffians. And I reeled away, and then I thought, oh, this is pretty interesting, and I went back, and I must have watched it for an hour, and it was this harrowing spectacle of, I don't know if it was past lives, my own horrific potential, or an unconscious flow of negativity. But afterwards, I was completely exhilarated at having had privy to this procession from within myself.
Mm.
I didn't have to act on it, but I was very enriched for the experience. I felt that way.
Mm. It's really a helpful thing. So there could be little moments in which these shadow faces show themselves, and we say to ourselves, oh, so that's in me too. Goes back to the line from Terence about that's me. Whatever all those other people are doing, that's me. It's a very Buddhist realization, because you're basically saying, I'm not a separate self. I'm the self of all humanity. Now, he brought up angels, and I do want to mention one other feature of this. There's a tendency in all of us humans, it's one of the wonderful features of creating literature, to personify certain abstractions. So we will, instead of saying there's evil, an abstraction, we will say there's a devil. And he looks like this. He's got horns and tail, and he's red body, or however you want to picture him. Lucifer, Satan. That would be a personification of that negative dark side. Angels, guardian angel, personification of your positive shadow side. So many of the religious symbols, including the ones in Buddhism, because Buddha would represent our wonderful positive side, these characters, instead of our looking at them as actual beings, we could say this is the personification turning into a person. This is the personification of a feature of myself and the collective shadow. So I have Lucifer representing the darkest impulses, and then I have Michael the archangel representing the forces of light. In the Apocalypse, Book of Revelation says that at the end of time, they will have their final battle, and Michael will win. So another feature of this topic is the sense in religion and in Buddhism, because Buddhism looks forward to the new Buddha. This is the fifth Buddha, and the final one is Maitreya, the Buddha of love, which will bring an end to war and hate. And in religion, we have the same promise. The end of time, the Archangel Michael, forces of light, he will destroy the dark forces once and for all. So somewhere in us is the belief that the shadow could come to an end. And you would have to ask yourself if that's in you. It's certainly a comforting belief to have. To say, well, someday there'll be no war, no slavery, no genocide, and so forth. And it could be that there'll be less of all that. Or it could be that they'll find an alternative to the kind of war we have now. But I personally don't really believe that there is such a Shangri-La. That there's some, Atlantis, Shangri-La, Shambhala, these places that, there used to be a place like this, but it isn't around anymore. I can't imagine that, because if there's a human in the story, there's going to be some type of dark thing happening. It's just who we are. We don't have to act on it, but it's definitely in us. Everybody get what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, at least the Theravadan Buddhist scriptures have a different version of what happens. So, in the Theravadan scriptures, even after the Buddha achieves full enlightenment, there are several references to Mara, the embodiment of the hindrances, including greed, hatred, and delusion, coming to visit him. So that's a different ending to the story, right? So it's still a little bit heroic in the sense that one probably has to interpret it as something like the hindrances arose, but he doesn't act upon them. Or the hindrances arise, but he recognizes them as mere illusions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, so the promise would be something similar to that for human society, would be that more people would be like that, and therefore hindrances would still arise, but people wouldn't act on them, just as there are certain impulses today, like say cannibalism, which people don't typically act on or typically even think about, right? Because the needs have passed.
Yeah. Good point. There are some things that have disappeared.
There was another.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
It occurs to me that each one of the things that you mentioned that are permanent elements of our human experience, they're all based on people. We have this ability to perceive ourselves as we're human, and people like me are human, and there are these others. And we make slaves of them, we make war on them, we do that. And it's our susceptibility to that, to triggering that, we'll perceive this group as an other, which really sustains the continuation of all that. And throughout history, leaders, institutions have taken advantage of that. It seems to me like we're living at a time where that seems to be going on
right. I mean, all over.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what you imagine might intervene in that continuing dynamic, or how to interfere in that.
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you brought that up, and what a great way to put it. Like, as long as there's the sense of us and them, as long as there's the sense that one group can overtake another group, it's the opposite of there is no separate self, we're more likely to engage in those 5 examples that I gave. And I guess the only answer I would have is, you reminded me of a line from The Tempest, in which Shakespeare says, this is Prospero, the exiled duke, referring to the shadow character in the play, and he points to Caliban and he says, "This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine. This thing of darkness, this separate thing that we've all been persecuting, I now want to bring it into myself, withdraw my projection, and say that this is part of me." That would be the only way we could ever get past the permission to enslave and hurt others who are different from ourselves. Did you have more? Would you add anything to that? Does that make sense?
It's just a point that occurred to me, and I just sort of wanted to bring it up and see what you might have to do.
Yeah, I'm glad so glad you brought that up. Other ideas?
Listening to you, the question that resonates the more and more is, who is the observer? Who is the one who is observing within myself? And in those terms, what really comes closer and closer is that impression that is the one who feels the energy per se. I know what you call the personification of something. And that is something which is it's very interesting, because it brings me to another concept which I hear many times in Vedanta and in Ayurveda, this concept that we choose our parents. And that, for me, is the first time that I can see these two aspects together as one, because that will make us what we are in terms of possibilities and inabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. I like what you're saying. Other ideas? Yes? What is your first name?
Bob.
Bob.
When you were talking about the various conditions of the final struggle, after which things will be ideal.
Yes, everything will be great.
Whenever I hear that, I wonder, why not now? Why doesn't that happen now? What is going to cause it then that's not available now? And so bringing into question in myself, is what I'm being told real? Does that have validity as a hope even?
Yes. Very good point. Yeah, St. Michael the Archangel is available right this minute. Why are we waiting? It reminded me of a prayer from my childhood. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the malice and snares of the devil. When we say malice and snares of the devil, we're disowning the malice and snares within ourselves. So when we are asking the help of a higher power to deal with the evils around us, we're kind of skipping over our part in it all. And if we could just acknowledge the little ways in which we do some things that we're not ultimately proud of, that acknowledgement, like the idea in the 12-step program of the fourth step, where you kind of make an inventory of the various negative shortcomings in yourself and try to make amends for them. That's more of a path than how do we stamp out evil. Because it isn't really set up that way, that it can be stamped out. Yeah?
I really like what you said about your new understanding of Hitler being a person who fulfills our need, our collective need, our shadow. And it occurs to me how many parallels there are with the current political situation. And the personification of people calling it Antichrist, et cetera. And really, maybe the best thing we can do is own our piece of that shadow. That he is indeed representing a part of us, and that we can each own our parts. And
Yes. Very good point.
Yeah, I just had a thought I was sitting around here. What if what we're calling this oppositional light and darkness, what if maybe there's just an oppositional dynamic that is just part of the soup that makes everything happen in the universe, which is why an ultimate reconciliation of the two is not particularly likely to happen.
The constant clash, yes, it's like thesis, antithesis, synthesis. You're right. The only problem is that we fall into this dark side too extremely rather than finding the creative gold kernels in all these negative features. And that would create a different kind of clash that would bring about more well-being. Yeah.
Another aspect I think about acknowledging one's shadow side emerges with an experience I had early in my Buddhist practice when people were talking about road rage. And I thought to myself, no, not me. Do people really do that? I can't believe that. No, not me. And so the next time I was driving, of course, somebody got in front of me, and I got really angry, and I felt that fury, and I thought to myself, this is great. I am an asshole after all. But what I see in that is that it made me feel more human, and it made me feel more connected.
Yes. That's an example of you found the creative dimension of it. You found something valuable, the gold kernel,
yes,
inside the ugly shell. Yeah.
As I've been listening, it's been an interesting conversation all around, but I was thinking of like a primary impetus here seems to me to be dominance and submission, that everything that we are engaged in is a question of what do we allow, or what do we want, or what dominates us, or what do we submit to. It's almost like a computer program. It's an on switch and an off switch. And we're constantly shifting back and forth from one thing to another because we have to. We don't have any choice. And we find that sometimes we find, I think, that if we are, if we get into being dominant, then that we find some pleasure. Or we could be submissive and find pleasure. And so we tend to build on those experiences. But I think we'll never get away from that choice between dominant and submissive in everything that we do, not just in the big things, but in everything that we do. I think there is that question of how do we want to, in this particular instance, dominate it or be submissive to it, or be submissive.
Mm-hmm. And that's another example of the two sides of the coin, that everybody has some part that's submissive and some part that's dominant. And then it would also follow, I know our time is about up, but just one last thing, which is that this would also mean if every coin has two sides, then if you feel a lot of fear and anxiety, you must have equal amount of courage on the other side of your coin. It's just a matter of turning it over, shall we say. Pay attention to the heads instead of the tails. Well, I was thinking, this topic is so damn difficult, and I'm sorry it wasn't a lot of fun to go through this whole discussion, but I thought it was an important thing to look at. But I'd like to end with a short poem by Edwin Markham called Outwitted. They drew a circle to shut me out, called me heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and brought them in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are there any announcements from folks? Things coming up? Urgent news? Bob?
I hope you're not bored with my reminding you about the day-long spring retreat that's coming up on Saturday, March 23rd, right here. Cindy Spring will be talking on the topic of wisdom stories about death and afterlife. There is no charge. You ask Donna. There will be a meal. I have heard rumors that there will be a vegan offering as well as part of that.
And there's information and registration forms in the...
Well, the information for registration is out there.
Okay.
I also have an announcement.
Please.
I'll be doing a short workshop with Victoria Austin at the San Francisco Zen Center, corner of Laguna and Page. It's called Love and Power, and you can sign up if you're interested at the Zen Center website.
What day?
So I'm sorry, it's March 9th. So it's coming up in a couple of weeks.
The monthly Radical Dharma Study book group, we're into a new book now. It's called The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, who's an African-American female science fiction fantasy writer. It's really a different approach. It's pretty cool. And we meet the first Sunday of the month. So if anyone's interested, you can speak to me or John. I just slip out pretty quickly after this morning. But there's also information on the Facebook. If you're part of GBF, I think there's an announcement on there as well. But you can find me or John if you're interested about the book and just joining. Just read the book and show up. It takes place after 1 to 3 after Sangha on first Sunday of the month. Any other announcements? Please, George.
Out on the table there by the snacks, there are 2 bags of pink grapefruit that I picked on Tuesday in Palm Springs. Please help yourself.
I'm the host today. There's tea and food. I'll come around with a Donna bowl. If you're new, people gather for lunch at 12:30. Is that it? That's it.
Sign-up sheet.
What?
Sign-up
A
sheet.
sign-up sheet, yeah. I created just a sign-up sheet so you can get email announcements.
Okay. Well, welcome to those who are new. Thanks for coming, and we can stand and circle for the dedication of merit.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. May all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.